Have you ever wondered how a single city on the banks of the Tiber River grew into one of the greatest empires in history? How Rome built roads that stretched for thousands of miles, armies that conquered vast lands, and cities filled with breathtaking architecture? And how, after centuries of power, this mighty empire eventually collapsed, leaving behind ruins and legends that still shape our world today. This is the story of the Roman Empire, a civilization of ambition, innovation, and extraordinary influence. The story begins in the 8th century BCE, when a small settlement grew on 7 hills beside the Tiber River. According to legend, it was founded by Romulus and Remus, twin brothers raised by a she-wolf. Whatever the truth, Rome started as a kingdom, then became a republic in 509 BCE, after its people overthrew the monarchy. This republic was ruled not by kings, but by elected officials and a senate, giving citizens a say in their government. It was an experiment in politics that would later inspire modern democracies. As Rome expanded, it fought wars with neighboring states, but the real turning point came with the Punic Wars against Carthage. These wars, fought over control of trade in the Mediterranean, tested Rome's strength. After 3 long conflicts, Rome destroyed Carthage completely and emerged as the dominant power in the region. From there, its influence spread across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But Rome was more than its conquests. Its armies were the backbone of the empire, disciplined and highly organized. A Roman soldier wasn't just a fighter, he was also a builder, constructing forts, roads, and bridges wherever the legions went. The saying, "all roads lead to Rome," comes from the fact that Romans built over 250,000 miles of roads, connecting distant provinces to the capital. These roads allowed trade, communication, and military power to move quickly across the empire. In Rome itself, the city grew into a marvel of engineering and culture. Aqueducts carried fresh water for miles into towns and cities. Amphitheaters like the Colosseum hosted gladiator games that drew tens of thousands of spectators. Public baths became centers of social life, where people met, relaxed, and conducted business. Roman architecture, with its arches, domes, and concrete, changed the way cities were built forever. The Republic, however, was not without problems. As Rome grew richer, inequality between the elite and the poor widened. Political conflicts grew bitter, and generals like Julius Caesar began to use their armies for personal power. Caesar himself became one of the most famous figures in history. A brilliant general, he expanded Rome's territory into Gaul, and his popularity threatened the Senate. In 44 BCE, he was assassinated by senators who feared he wanted to be king. But instead of saving the Republic, his death plunged Rome into chaos and civil war. From that chaos, Rome was transformed into an empire. Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus, emerged victorious. In 27 BCE, he became the first emperor of Rome, marking the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Under Augustus, Rome entered a period of peace and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, which lasted for about 200 years. During this time, trade flourished, cities expanded, and Rome's influence reached its height. At its peak, the Roman Empire stretched from Britain in the northwest to Egypt in the south, and from Spain in the west to Mesopotamia in the east. It was home to perhaps 70 million people, about a fifth of the world's population at the time. The empire was a mix of cultures, languages, and traditions, all connected by Roman law, Roman roads, and Roman order. Daily life in the empire varied depending on who you were. In Rome, wealthy citizens lived in grand houses with mosaics and running water, while poorer people crowded into multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. Markets bustled with goods from across the empire, spices from the east, wine from Gaul, olive oil from Spain. For entertainment, there were theaters, chariot races at the Circus Maximus, and of course, gladiator games. Education was valued, especially for boys, who learned reading, writing, rhetoric, and philosophy. Women had fewer rights but could still own property and run businesses, especially in wealthier families. One of Rome's greatest achievements was its system of law. Roman law emphasized principles like equality before the law, the right to a fair trial, and the idea that laws should be written and applied consistently. These concepts influenced later European legal systems and still shape laws in many countries today. But while Rome's accomplishments were remarkable, the empire also faced deep challenges. Maintaining such vast territory was costly. Corruption and political instability weakened the government. The empire was often shaken by succession crises, as emperors were overthrown, assassinated, or replaced by rivals. By the 3rd century CE, Rome was under pressure from both inside and outside. Barbarian tribes like the Goths, Vandals, and Huns began pressing on the empire's borders. Meanwhile, economic troubles and heavy taxation strained the population. In 285 CE, Emperor Diocletian tried to solve the problems by dividing the empire into eastern and western halves. The eastern half, later known as the Byzantine Empire, grew stronger, while the western half became more vulnerable. One of the most famous emperors during this later period was Constantine the Great. He reunited the empire briefly, moved the capital to Byzantium, later called Constantinople, and made changes that would influence the future of Europe. But even with reforms, the Western Empire continued to decline. In 476 CE, the last Roman emperor in the West, Romulus Augustulus, was overthrown by a Germanic leader named Odoacer. Historians often mark this as the official fall of the Western Roman Empire. Yet the story didn't end there. The Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, survived for nearly another 1,000 years, preserving much of Roman culture, law, and learning until its fall in 1453. The legacy of Rome is enormous. The Latin language evolved into Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian. Roman law formed the basis of modern legal systems. Roman architecture influenced everything from government buildings to sports stadiums. Even the idea of a senate, a republic, and citizenship comes directly from Rome's example. When we look at Rome today, we see ruins, the Colosseum, the aqueducts, the remains of temples and roads. But those ruins tell the story of a people whose ambition built one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. Rome rose from a small village to dominate much of the known world, shaping the course of history in ways still felt today. The Roman Empire was not just about emperors and battles. It was about citizens, soldiers, builders, thinkers, and dreamers. They created a civilization that balanced strength with innovation, power with culture, and conquest with creativity. And even though the empire itself eventually collapsed, its influence never truly died. 2,000 years later, we still live in the shadow of Rome.